Why do so many of us live our lives like we're just trying to keep God happy? Maybe freedom isn't the absence of rules, but about surrender. That's what we're talking about in this week's episode of Monday Moments. Hey there, welcome to another episode of Monday Moments, the show in which we take a deeper dive into Sunday's sermon and into God's Word. My name's Travis, your host. With me today is Pastor James. And diving into chapter 5 of Galatians, which I think is part 9 of our sermon series.
Very possible.
If my memory serves me correctly, I don't know how many people nowadays are familiar with Galatians, but if anybody is familiar with Galatians, it's that famous, it's for freedom that you've been set free. Really talking about freedom. So, but before we get into kind of our discussion, our conversation, if there's anybody who maybe missed Sunday, maybe could you give just a kind of a summary, kind of a recap of what you shared?
So we've moved into kind of the final, not chapter, but kind of the final phase, the final movement.
You said there's kind of 3 parts to this book.
Three movements throughout. First 2 chapters, Paul is kind of giving his autobiography, like who is he? Why does he have the authority to say what he's saying? What's his background? What gives him the ability to kind of speak these things? The second part, he deals with kind of the doctrine, and I would say if there's a real theme through Galatians, it would be grace. He's talking about grace. And so he gives us this doctrine of grace, this understanding. And then in this kind of final movement, chapters 5 and 6, he's moving into the practical application. Like, how does this apply to my life? And again, with the overview, kind of what is undergirding everything was this kind of infectious movement of people that are trying to get them to kind of rely on the law and not so much on grace. And so Paul is dealing with this idea through the entire thing. And so, like you said, Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has made you free. Don't become entangled again with this yoke of bondage. And so we talked a lot about, like, what is this freedom that Paul's talking about. I think when you're dealing with people, especially with a word that is maybe common but has multiple ways to be understood, we tend to define those words with whatever meaning is most familiar to us. And I think especially when it comes to Scripture, it's important that we define these as the author intended, not necessarily how maybe we would interpret those things. I see a lot of issues at times with within the church, within Christianity, of people kind of redefining things based upon their own preferences or their own desires. So,
are we defining it on God's terms or on our own terms or our own understanding? And all of the imperfections that go along with that. Speaking of kind of our culture and definitions, how has, maybe if it's our culture, cultural understanding of freedom, or maybe it's just a humanity understanding of freedom, either way, how does this idea of freedom being I can do whatever I want, how do you feel like that has maybe shaped or misshaped our concept or understanding of grace?
I mean, I think that we tend to look at grace through this, I'll just say American view of freedom, because really there is no country in the world that is more free than America.
Definitely.
Than America. And so Americans have this concept of freedom. We're like, we get to do all of these different things. And so freedom is almost like this forward looking word that's like, oh, look at what is available to me. Look at what I can do. Look at all of these things that are that are beneficial to me. And in reality, like our American freedom is very much, in many ways, it's very self-serving because it affords me a lot of opportunities. And so when we kind of grow up in this world, which again I'll say, and I said yesterday, I am so grateful that I live in a country that has afforded me all of these freedoms, like the freedom to gather, the freedom to worship God publicly, the freedom to not be persecuted for these things, and so that's a huge blessing, huge benefit, especially when you see the lack of freedom in a lot of other places that you go throughout the world. Like there's tremendous restrictions. The problem is that if we define freedom that way, when it comes to what Paul is speaking of, we have completely missed the point of this. Yeah, the freedom that Paul is speaking of is almost a backwards looking freedom. We have been freed from the burden of trying to earn our salvation. It has been given to us, and unfortunately, the way that a lot of people think of that is like, oh, this freedom now gives me the freedom to kind of do whatever I want in grace, because grace is what's undergirding this entire thing. They misinterpret. It's like, well, grace will cover that. So, I may not be living the life that I should be, or I may continue to mess up, but we almost cheapen grace by reducing it to a free pass when we mess up. And so I think a lot of times we don't rightly lament the sin in our life, which is why we don't see a lot of change. And if we misunderstand freedom, then we'll think, well, I'm kind of free to do these things.
I think we miss, how do I say this? Like the value, the severity, if I can say it that way, of what Jesus went through and what he earned for us, and really the totality of the fulfillment of the law. And really what an amazing thing that was that God did for us.
And I think maybe the easiest way to put it in a kind of a vernacular that we understand, we were in bondage to the law. We were chained to the law. And again, it wasn't that the law was bad, it's that we were incapable of keeping the law. And so as a result of that, we were condemned. And what Jesus did through his sacrifice on the cross is he unchained us from that.
That's right.
He freed us from this captor in the law that we could not satisfy. And in doing so, he has set us free to live in the grace that was afforded to us through the cross.
We've talked about this at length now, that the law was never bad. It just was powerless to save. And I loved your analogy. That's like, I can see what I look like in a mirror, but then if I try to start scrubbing the dirt off my face with a mirror, like, it's just not going to do any good. It's just make a bigger mess. And it's interesting that we still try to chain ourselves back up again to this powerless way of life. We're just incapable of really providing what we're hoping that it's going to provide. And I love that you talk about, free from what, for what, I think that's a big question. It's like, okay, without that kind of context, we're like, okay, freedom sounds nice. It sounds great. But if you don't really understand what you're freed from and what you're freed for, it loses, I think, a lot of its value and a lot of its impact and potential power to then go and really do what God is calling us to do and be who God is calling us to be. So talking about grace versus earning, and kind of wanting to go back to that powerless way of living, under the law, being chained again to the law, why do you feel like believers so often we still try to earn what's already been given?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tricky question, because I think that there's multiple reasons why we want to do it. I would say that the preponderance of reasons would centralize around one idea. We are by nature selfish. Yeah. And honestly, when we are trying to earn something, it really comes down to us wanting our own way. Yeah. And so most of the earning that we try to do it's not selfless earning. It's selfish earning. Yeah. We're saying, Lord, if I do this, will you give me this thing that I want? In other words, I know what I want, and if I just try really hard, or if I do these different things, then maybe I can influence you enough to give me what it is that I want. Whereas coming before the Father and saying, Father, you know what's best for me. Yeah. And so I am going to submit to your will, and I am going to trust that whatever you give me, whether it's good times or hard times that I'm going through, I'm going to trust that your provision is sufficient, and what you're trying to build in me is actually for my best. That's right. And that becomes very hard. Yeah. Because again, there's this motivation is that I can do this on my own in order to oftentimes kind of get what I want out of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole concept of surrender is hard for us. Yeah, and because it goes all the way back to the beginning. Yeah. We Adam and Eve had that choice that we can either trust God and just receive what He wants to give us, or we can try to declare and decide this is good or that is not good, and then take.
Well, and I think that's, we looked at it a little bit. I kind of made that comparison of, freedom in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. It's kind of those things. And really, in many ways, the Christian life is just the opposite. Christ calls us to give up our lives. He who loses his life for my sake will save it. That's right. Paul talks about, I surrendered these certain things. I didn't do these things. I became like them, not in an anti-biblical way, or compromising those things, but he did certain things so that he could win them more. We talked a lot about the passage that we looked at was using this understanding of circumcision as kind of this representative of the law. It's like, here's this one thing, but this represents how we're doing things in order to try to please God, or to try to show our loyalties. But if you read, at one point he goes to Timothy and he says, "Hey Timothy, you should be circumcised." And so people, there's been people at times that are like, "Well, he's saying you shouldn't hear, and he's saying you should hear." Well, the context is different. One, in Galatians, they were trying to do it, in order to in order to prove their worth before God. They were trying to gain
their righteousness and their favor.
Their righteousness and earn their salvation in some ways. With Timothy, what he was saying, he says, hey, the place that we're going, this would become a major stumbling block to the presentation of the gospel. And so this is something that we should do, not on the basis of righteousness, but on the basis of it will open the number of opportunities that we have to share the gospel of grace with these people. Right. And so the action was the same, the motivation was very different. Right. And I think that's the hard thing in our hearts, is that what I may be doing might be right, but it might be for the wrong motives. Right. And so we have to really check our heart in all of these things and say, am I doing this in order to earn God's favor? Am I doing this in order to prove my own righteousness? Or am I doing this because this is where the Lord is leading me and because of the opportunities it's going to open for him?
And it's really, I think, a great analogy to go back to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And I think it really does drill down to the heart of it and say, what are your motives in pursuing happiness? And number one, are you going to try to define happiness, what's good, what's beautiful, what's right on your own terms, or are you going to define it on God's terms? And let's just take, quote unquote, the American dream, right? Are you going to pursue that out of selfish, self-serving motives? Or, if I attain a certain amount of success or wealth or possessions, whatever, is that going to feed some part of my heart? Is that going to ultimately satisfy really only the place that God can satisfy? And we kind of becomes an idol in that sense, when there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong about those things, but it's the place in our heart that it occupies and the motive with which we are pursuing those things.
And I think what's interesting is I think that those motives can actually change over time. Those motives can begin good and end up selfish.
Definitely.
And Paul speaks a little bit to that. He says, hey, stand firm. Like there's going to be some resistance. Like it's going to become hard. But then he also, and we'll talk about this next week, but he gets into this and he says, I think it's in verse 7, he says, you were running so well. Like he makes it very clear, like you were on the right track. And I think that's where a lot of believers find themselves, is that they find themselves as like, well, I was on the right track. And so they just kind of continue headlong into this. And all of a sudden they end up one day and they're like, it just doesn't satisfy me anymore. And we get sidetracked by any number of things. Absolutely. But all of a sudden, we wake up one day and we recognize, like, hey, my motives for this have changed. And I think that's why Paul is so emphatic about, hey, look, like you need to stand firm. In not just what you were called out of and what you were set free from, but you really need to stand firm in the motivations behind why you first chose to follow Jesus. And for a lot of Christians, I feel like those words hold pretty true. Like you were running so well, and then you allowed something to come in and kind of deceive you from those. And for Paul to the churches of Galatia, he was speaking about these Judaizers who were like, look, you accepted the gospel of grace, and then you allowed some people to convince you that the grace was not sufficient. That it needed now for you to do these things. And almost like, hey, you can be more righteous if you just do all of these different things. And like I said before, when he talks about that yoke, a yoke is really good for steering an unruly thing. And so we can actually use the law to steer our unruly hearts in the right direction. But the motivation behind it will always either lead to bondage or lead to freedom.
That's right.
And the yoke created a tremendous amount of bondage on these animals. It steered them in the right direction. It allowed them to be manageable. But it also didn't allow them to be free.
That's right.
And so what Paul is saying is like, look, the law is like a yoke. It may steer you in the right direction. It may kind of keep this unruly heart of yours in check in some ways. But it's also going to lead you into bondage.
You
can't get set free from
That's
it.
Good. That's good. I know we're going to start kind of creeping up on our time limit here, but I want to dive into something you said a minute ago. We kind of started to scratch the surface of this, kind of the quiet idols in our life. I think, let me ask it this way. What are some good things, quote unquote, good things that can quietly become idols in our life or, in church community? What are some of those, like I said, quote unquote, good things that can quietly become idols?
I think habits, like we can choose to have some really good habits for good reasons.
Sure.
But then I think that we can become prideful about our habits.
Yeah.
Oh, I spend more time than you do.
That's right.
You know, it's like, I get up every morning and I spend an hour with the Lord.
Yeah.
And all of the motivations in the world could be right in the beginning of those things. And again, I think that goes back to what Paul was saying. Like, you were running so good.
Yeah.
Like, you were crushing it
Right.
in the beginning. But then you started to kind of look at your life and go, well, because of these things that the Lord called me to initially, that makes me better than you. And you know, the priest, and this is another thing. Like, when you read about the priest and the Pharisees and the Sadducees in Scripture, they all get a really, really bad rap. Like,
They do, yeah.
and I think it's unfortunate, because I think that there was a lot of those men who really did yearn for, like, they were looking for the Messiah. And we read about that a little bit, you know, those who came to Jesus and they wanted to know, like, they were passionate about these things.
Yeah.
But there's a part of religion that just always wants to steal, like it wants to elevate us at some level. And that's why the relationship that we have with Jesus becomes so incredibly important. And I think that for we're actually gonna talk about a few of these things next week.
Cool.
I'll kind of give you know, a few things. Worship.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Big time.
we can become very prideful. Our worship can become one of those things that we're like, well, you know,
Yeah.
my worship's better than yours.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
because I like this or I like that. And in a lot of those different ways, I think the Lord can come and speak to me. There's people who have asked me at times, you know, hey, what are some of the things that you hold your life to that other people might not? I'm like, well, a lot of those things are very personal, because for me, the Lord would come and is like, hey, I want to carve this out. That may not be an issue for anybody else.
Yeah.
But it was something that the Lord kind of put on my life. And so I always tell people, like, don't try to emulate all of the things or the restrictions or stuff like that I put on my own life. But I'll be honest, like, at times it can become one of those things that it's like, well, you know, I don't do that. And I see that a lot with people that come out of difficult places of their life.
Right.
And they come into Christianity and they start to make these really positive changes in their life.
Sure.
Well, all of a sudden they use those positive changes to look down on people that haven't done that. And it's like, oh, you missed it. Like, you were doing so well. Like, you were listening to the Lord. He was changing you. He was shaping you, all for the benefit of being a witness. And now you're using some of your goodness, your betterness in some of these areas to now look down on people and say, well, I'm better. And that was the problem with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Is they would be like, hey, look at me. I'm so much better, right? Because I get all these things right, and you're so much worse because you get all these things wrong. Yep. And so I think you really could kind of define almost anything.
Sure.
In that category. Yeah. It really comes down to what's the motivation of the heart behind all these things.
Yeah, it makes me think of, you know, for a long time, I think in the last few years, we've seen kind of the rise. I think we're starting to see it decline, but this hustle culture.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, you got...
I work harder than you.
Well, and you've got these people who are like, I wake up every day at 4 a.m. and then I meditate for an hour, and I cold plunge, you know, for 30 minutes. And
I run for 7 hours while I listen to 8 audiobooks on 9 speed.
And I did a 10-day juice fast.
Yeah.
And, who knows? I'm making things up at this point. But, you know, and I think those might be well and good for you, you know, and that might be something that is beneficial.
Yeah.
But they start to hold it and weaponize it as I'm better than you. And if you want to be like me and perform at this elite level, and not kind of putting themselves like, this is the elite, they're defining it that way, then you have to do what I do, and you have to live this lifestyle like I live. And it's like, well, no, that's not.
I think of one influencer. I don't even know what he sells, but he wants all the guys on his team to wear his name on his shirt, on their shirt. Gosh. And he's notorious for bringing people up.
Yeah.
And like, you have to take your shirt off, and then he sits there and body shames you. And I'm like,
what is this?
What are we doing?
What is
like,
this?
What like, what are we doing? Yeah. But it's a really good example of what I feel like happens a lot of times within the Christian culture.
Definitely.
Is like, we look at something that the Lord has asked us to do, and we assume, if the Lord has asked me to do it, then he wants everybody to do it. And if you're not doing it, then you're living in disobedience.
Right.
And so I'm going to shame you into these things.
Yeah.
Look, I have been following the Lord for, genuinely following the Lord since I was probably 18. Before that, it was my parents' faith. I was always, I was always desiring to know more of Jesus, but it wasn't until I really moved out and made those decisions on my own that this faith really began to come alive. And so, for me, that's the better part of 30 years of my life at this point. And I would not expect someone who has only been following the Lord for 4 or 5 years for their life to be being lived exactly the way that my life is.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of little things that people will never see or know that the Lord has done in my life that have kind of shaped the way that I do things. Now, the truth of the matter is that there's still, there's still a lot of those little things that I'm sure the Lord will continue to reveal to me.
Sure.
For the rest of my life that he wants me to change. Yeah. But it would be foolish of me to think that that my young kids would have the same convictions about everything, the same understanding that I do about everything, the same practices and habits that I do. When they've been following the Lord for much less time. Yeah. So how do I use the things that the Lord has taught me not to shame or guilt somebody or to somehow elevate myself in a position, but to use those things to win the more. Paul says, I do these things so that I might win the more.
That's right.
And if that means that I've got to sacrifice some things in my life for your benefit, Lord, thank you for counting me worthy.
Yeah. Well, what did Paul write? I think it was in chapter 4. I think we just covered it. Maybe it was chapter 3. I can't remember the exact address. It's in Galatians, but we said, what began in the spirit, are you now trying to perfect in the flesh?
Exactly.
And how often we forget that, number one, this was initiated not by us, but by the Spirit.
Yeah.
And number two, for all the things that you were just kind of referencing, that all came out of your relationship with the Lord. Yeah. And it would be horribly burdensome and enslaving to take what the Lord revealed to you and led you in relationship to then take it and systematize it and make a program out of it and said, this is the prescribed way that everybody has to live.
Yeah.
And it would divorce everyone from their relationship with the Lord, their personal relationship. Yeah. And that's what we see, I think, with that young Galatian church and the Judaizers, is that there's no relationship there. Replace it with religion.
You see it in the parable of the debtors, where this one guy is in debt to this guy who holds his debt, and it's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And the guy comes and he forgives the debt. And then that guy who has major debt has been forgiven, goes and has someone who owes him a significantly less amount thrown in jail.
Yeah.
And there's this uproar. And Jesus essentially says, like, you do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I have forgiven you. It is for freedom that Christ has set you free.
Yeah.
There's no Christ and James or Christ and Travis has set you free. It is for freedom that Christ has set you free.
Yeah.
He has fulfilled all of the debt.
Yep.
And then for us who have been forgiven to go and hold that debt against somebody's account. It's like, unless you do this, you have no hope in this world.
Yep.
And to begin to look at that and go, well, wait a second. No, I've been forgiven much.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount. And so it should produce within me. He who has been forgiven much loves much. Jesus's words. And it wasn't just, it's not just loving Jesus, but it's loving those who Jesus loves.
That's right.
And walking with them with the same grace and mercy that he has walked with us in those things. Yeah. And we can so quickly turn that in our life of like, hey, because you do this, it makes you better. No, it doesn't make me better. It maybe I've been walking with the Lord longer and I see the effects of these things. So how can I help this brother or sister now walk in such a way that will bring some real freedom, not through guilt and shame, but through just this absolute, I owe Jesus everything.
Yeah.
And I want to show you how free you really can be because of his grace.
Yeah, that's good. And kind of wrapping up and, sort of landing the plane, how would you encourage someone to continuously walk in this kind of freedom? You mentioned earlier this charge to stand firm, whether it's cultural pressure, whether it's internal doubts, or just the hardness of life and the seasons of life. How would you encourage someone to stand firm, to not be burdened by this yoke of slavery, to walk in that kind of freedom, to live both with and for Christ?
Yeah. So I will use one word to point us to a concept that I constantly point us towards. It begins with humility, a willingness to view myself rightly, and to look at my life and go, okay, am I doing this well in these different areas? And that humility should lead us, should always lead us towards community. Community creates a tremendous amount of security for us.
Yeah.
One, we're not alone.
Definitely.
But two, it allows our life to be observed up close by people who love us.
Right.
And the humility comes into community when someone comes to us, and we should hold one another accountable, not out of a self-righteous standpoint, but saying, hey, I've seen some areas in your life that I think are detrimental to you.
Yeah.
How can I come alongside and help you walk through this so that you really can experience that freedom? And that humility is this willingness to always look at my life and say, Lord, am I honoring you the way that you would want me to honor you? And again, I gave a little bit of teaser at the end of the service that we're going to talk about next week, but Paul says that these things should be worked out in love, like through love.
Right.
And 1 Corinthians gives us a pretty good definition of what love is. And it's not an easy definition to read as it relates to different areas of our life. Like, can I check each of those boxes as it defines love? And we're gonna look at another letter. We're going to look at James's letter, where he talks about, faith faith and works.
Right.
And what he is essentially saying is that our faith should be evidenced.
Right.
And Paul says there in Galatians, it should be evidenced in our love.
Right.
Which is also what Jesus says. It is by your love that the world will know that the Father has sent the Son. Love is the greatest witnessing tool that we have. And here we're going to get into it again a little bit next week. Love is a similar word like freedom.
Yeah.
It has been redefined.
Oh, yeah.
By our culture and by our society as to, this is love. Love doesn't, love doesn't confront. Love doesn't do these things. Love allows whatever we want to feel to be okay.
Yep.
And that's not love.
No,
it's just not love. And so we'll look at how does Scripture really define love?
Yeah,
because it's important when we see these things that says, that your faith should be lived out, worked out through love.
Yeah.
It's important that we know what that means.
It is. Yeah, and I love that simple definition of faith. It's living as though the Bible were true.
Yeah.
You know, if this is true, then what?
Yeah.
And are we, I think, again, whether it's the book of James or Galatians, we can look at this word works.
Yeah.
And I can think to myself, I ought to love people, so I got to do a bunch of loving things.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hold on a second.
No.
Why don't we experience the love of Christ and really receive?
Yeah.
And out of that, let that overflow into love for others.
The natural result of that.
That's right.
The faith in His grace.
That's right.
Is the root. We should plant our faith in His grace. Is what Paul says. He says that it is faith in the grace that saved us. If we push our roots of faith down into His grace, the natural fruit that comes out of that is love.
Right. Right.
It is what is produced as long as we are planted in grace.
That's right. That's good. Well, thank you for taking some time out of your day to dive into this, and thank you for taking some time to join us for another episode of Monday Moments. And I just want to ask, if faith can be defined as living as though the Bible were true, what implications does our conversation or Pastor James's message from Sunday have for you today? What did God share to you either from Sunday or from our conversation today, and how then might God be calling you to live? And so that's my question for you, and I hope that you will prayerfully engage the living God who wants to have a relationship with you, not just a religion. How can you live your life today based on our conversations, based on Pastor James's message, based on the truth of God's Word? We hope you're blessed by today's conversation. We will see you next week.